All right, we are live on this Saturday morning, February 28th. MS Now live coverage of the breaking news overnight and developing this morning. The U.S. and Israel launching major combat operations against Iran in the early hours of this morning. Iran has already responded with retaliatory strikes of its own against Israel and other countries in the region, including Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, and Qatar. In a social media post confirming the U.S. attacks, President Trump called for the overthrow of Iran's government and urged the Iranian people to rise up.
Finally, to the great, proud people of Iran, I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Stay sheltered. Don't leave your home. It's very dangerous outside. Bombs will be dropping everywhere. When we are finished, take over your government. It will be yours to take. This will be probably your only chance for generations.
Over the past week, Willie, David Ignatius and I have been talking to the negotiators U.S. negotiators or people around the negotiators who had a very positive view of progress that was being made. In my conversation with the president yesterday afternoon, though, he said the next 2 weeks will be very interesting and suggested that he needed to do something that no other president had been able to do since 1979. That's get rid of Iran's terror regime. I will say this morning, talking to our allies in the Gulf region, many obviously very concerned. One telling me that the United States and Israel attacked Iran, and yet they're facing no blowback from it. It's only the United States' allies. So if you attack, that's fine, but let us know and then be able to protect us. That said, though, Willie, one or two countries in the region have already voiced support for this attack.
Yeah, you talk about the UAE, you talk about Bahrain, Kuwait, Qatar. Those are home to American military bases that have come under attack since this joint strike from the United States and Israel inside of Iran, where, as we've been saying, if you're just waking up here at the top of the hour, 8 o'clock on the East Coast, the President of the United States, and you just heard it there, calling directly for regime change. It's not implied here. It's not something that he may think about later. He's saying this is about taking out the regime that effectively has been in place since 1979. David Ignatius has been reporting this morning that the supreme leader was, in fact, a target. David is with us, along with MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, MS Now national security and intelligence analyst, former CIA officer Mark Polymeropoulos, and retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling. A great group assembled to walk through this. David Ignatius, let me begin with you for people who are just waking up, just where we are right now and how diplomacy failed apparently in the last 24 to 48 hours to bring about these strikes.
Willie, to briefly summarize, the negotiators close to the process, the talks that have been taking place in Geneva, describe an Iranian offer that was close to President Trump's demand, close to an assurance that Iran will not have a nuclear weapon in the future. But I think there was very limited trust in those assurances. And it's clear that the president had a broader, deeper goal in mind, that he wanted to go to the heart. This regime is unpopular in the region, unpopular from everything we can see at home, and has decided on this very ambitious course. We all recall President Dave Petraeus, general in Iraq, his question as the Iraq war was unfolding in 2003, tell me how this ends. Nobody has an answer for that question in Iran. Just to share some new information, talking to sources in the Gulf, they describe Iran's missile attacks in response to the U.S. attacks on Iran as muted in terms of intensity, but lots of countries were targeted. So broad, but not having the kind of devastating effect that those countries feared. The UAE says it was successful in shooting down all the Iranian missiles that were coming. There is, among these Gulf countries, an expectation of future attacks on oil infrastructure and Gulf shipping, which would have a significant economic effect on energy prices if they're carried out. I also would note that the Saudi government just issued a statement expressing full solidarity and unwavering support for regional countries that have been hit by Iranian strikes. So in that sense, Saudi Arabia seems to be now openly voicing support for the U.S. position and against Iran. So those are a few new developments, but on the really big questions, Willie and Joe, we just don't have any answers yet.
Right. So,
Okay.
Earlier in our coverage here, we were talking with Richard Haass. This, of course, is, if you're just joining us, a major strike on Iran, a surprise attack, a joint operation with Israel. And Richard Haass was questioning the immediate threat that Iran was posing right now, calling this a war of choice. And Iran, by the way, immediately responding with missiles off in multiple directions. And I'm thinking of your reporting, your conversations with people close to the negotiations and even the president himself, focusing a lot on the history, on the past 47 years, rather than a strategy or an immediate threat right now, indicating, do you think, a long-term strategy here?
I circle back to what David Ignatius heard about somebody suggesting that it is a Viking-like strategy where you attack and then pull back and negotiate. This is something we discussed earlier in the week on Morning Joe, that it seemed after reporting from the New York Times that the president was going to follow up in Cuba the same way that he followed up in Venezuela, where you have a strong force off the Venezuelan coast, you negotiate, you strike, you pull back, and then the negotiations, you see what happens with the negotiations. They ended up, in the words of the president yesterday to me, which I found to be very insightful in trying to figure out how he's thinking of this. The president said, we got 2 people out of Venezuela, and now we have a chance to make it work for the United States and the region, suggesting the same thing could happen with Cuba. And I believe this must be the president's strategy with Iran. I don't see tens of thousands of boots on the ground. I don't see this being another Iraq. It seems that the president has fixed himself on a strategy, again, as David Ignatius said, a Viking-like strategy where you strike, you pull back, you negotiate, you threaten another strike. Well, I don't know whether that's going to happen, but it certainly seemed from my talks with the president yesterday, he was not interested in the niceties of the nuclear negotiations or the missile negotiations. He declared that the Iranian leaders were bad people who had killed Americans over the decades, and that the regime needed to be taken out. He didn't use those exact words, but Mika, after I discussed it with you, we both decided that seemed to be his strategy, whether it happened immediately or I thought perhaps over the next 3 to 4 days, because of the things that were saying by the Omani foreign minister and also my sources inside the negotiations. But Mark Polymeropoulos, I would love to have you help us on the intel side of this. General Herdling, obviously an extraordinary resource in telling us what war games, Iranian war games over the past decades have looked like and the strengths and weaknesses. One thing that the intel community has consistently warned American presidents about are the asymmetrical attacks that might follow, even if an Iranian government were crippled, that there could be terrorist attacks across the region, across Europe, even across America. That's something, again, for people that haven't been tuned in to this conflict for years. This is something that we've heard for decades. Even if you took the Iranian regime down, the terror elements of the regime would move forward. I know I've heard you saying this is something we should be concerned about for quite some time. Talk about that. Talk about the concerns the intel community has had for some time and what we should be looking looking for in the weeks and months to come, the possibilities?
Well, look, Joe, Iran is the leading state sponsor of terrorism on the planet and has been an adversary of the United States, an enemy of the United States for decades and decades. You know, we all have long memories of Iranian terrorist attacks. So the intelligence community and my old colleagues in the Counterterrorism Mission Center are going to be laser focused on what? Well, first of all, it's on protecting U.S. embassies, protecting U.S. facilities overseas. Iran has a very effective terrorist apparatus. We've seen them employ that. And so we're going to be working with our liaison partners of other intelligence services to kind of rattle the trees to make sure that any kind of known terrorist operatives around the world from Iran are being surveilled or being monitored. We're going to bolster our defenses at our embassies as well. And there's also the notion of what happens even in places like the United States. Look, the New York Police Department just put out a statement a couple hours ago saying they're on heightened alert. Well, they are because the New York Police Department and the FBI have foiled Iranian terrorist plots in the United States, in New York and Washington and other places. And so Iran has a lot of tools in their toolkit. And this is something that they would take not just days or weeks, but even months if this conflict goes on to put in place. And so I think that, a lot of us are going to focus on, Iranian missiles being shot at U.S. bases in the region. But the Iranian terrorist apparatus is quite effective, and we're going to have to be on our game on this. Just both the United States and our partners. One other key point, Joe, and I have to say this, I have to raise it, because for a lot of us, Iran has been an issue. It gets to be a little emotional as well. There's a long history, as President Trump noted, of Iranians killing Americans. Whether we're talking about our station chief in Beirut in the 1980s, Bill Buckley, someone whose grave I still visit at Arlington National Cemetery, the Marine barracks in Beirut, the U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Bob Ames, a legendary CIA officer David Ignatius knew well, in fact. Then you go on to Iraq with the explosively formed projectiles that Iran was providing to Shia proxy groups that killed Americans. Khobar Towers, a U.S. military housing complex. There's a lot of American blood on Iran's hands. And so as we debate this, whether this was wise or not, I think a lot of us in the national security world, particularly practitioners, are saying, look, the rent was really long overdue on this. Maybe this was not the right course of action. But there's a side of it that you have to kind of think back. And President Trump was right to kind of list those grievances that the U.S. has with Iran. Many of us do feel that way.
Good afternoon. I'm Rachel Maddow. It is 1 p.m. Eastern time, and you are joining MS Now's ongoing coverage of the United States having apparently started a war with Iran for some reason. Your guess, your personal guess, sitting at home watching me right now, your personal guess is as good as any as to why the president of the United States has just started this war. In terms of pure rational deduction about what he is doing here, we can basically rule out all of the reasons he has said he's doing it. Is Iran on the precipice of having ballistic missiles that can reach the United States? Absolutely not. The United States is very far from Iran. One might even say it's a whole continent away, which means a ballistic missile launched from Iran to hit us here would have to be an intercontinental ballistic missile. Does Iran have ICBMs? Does Iran have intercontinental ballistic missiles? No, it does not. And there is no known evidence or even serious allegation that Iran is anywhere near developing that technology anytime soon. Even Trump's Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, has recently admitting that the threat is only that maybe, quote, one day Iran might have that kind of capability. One day. Just like you or I might one day learn to fly or to time travel. Is Iran a week away from industrial grade uranium enrichment, as the president's diminutive real estate friend Steve Witkoff asserted this week when he was asked about the Iran talks he is inexplicably part of on behalf of the United States government and the people of the United States, despite his only relevant experience and training being that he is an old real estate friend of President Donald Trump? Is Iran, as Steve Witkoff says, a week away from achieving industrial-grade uranium enrichment for their nuclear program? No, they are not. No, they are not. Not only has there been no American or international evidence or intelligence made public that suggests even that they are doing that, but even the Trump administration says explicitly that that is not happening. Marco Rubio on Wednesday at a press conference in St. Kitts and Nevis told reporters, quote, "They are not enriching right now." So why is this happening? Have we just started a war with Iran because they have got some advanced nuclear program that's rushing toward a bomb? Ask President Donald Trump, who insists that the last time he ordered the bombing of Iran in June, that, quote, totally obliterated their nuclear program. It's hard to say that anything totally obliterated, gone, pulverized, erased from the earth might now suddenly be back again. And so therefore a war must urgently start today. So what are we doing here? It's not that they're about to get us with intercontinental ballistic missiles. It's not that they are enriching uranium to such a degree that it is dangerous and we must stop that. It's not that their nuclear program, which Trump says he obliterated, has somehow unobliterated itself and is now a pressing danger again. Why did we just go to war with Iran? The president has said a couple of times in recent days that he just wants the Iranian government to say the words that they are not pursuing a nuclear bomb, suggesting that if they would just say that, that would be enough to stop the United States from starting a war with them. Well, the Iranian government actually over and over again keeps saying that they are not developing a nuclear bomb. They will say it whenever you like. They say it whenever they are asked. So that does not appear to be the reason either. So why do you think President Donald Trump has just done this? Why do you think he has just started a war with Iran? Is it because his heart bleeds empathetically on a human level for the protesters in Iran who have been killed by their own government in such huge numbers in January and February of this year? Is it because Donald Trump really feels for the Iranian people? Is it because his heart throbs with a passionate support for the right of free speech and the right of people everywhere to protest against their own government and not face violence because of it? Is that what you think? If so, good morning. I hope you have slept well for this past decade in which you've been dead to the world. But, I mean, just suspend disbelief for a moment. Just suppose that the reason the United States of America has just started this war with Iran is because, as the president said today in his weird pre-recorded video message in a baseball hat and a suit jacket that the White House released at 2:30 in the morning, the president said in that stilted, strange statement, squinting at the camera with his eyes shaded by the gigantic white hat he was wearing, he said that he's doing this because he wants the people of Iran to rise up and overthrow their despotic government at his instruction. And maybe they will. Maybe they will try. But Iran is a huge, complex country. It is 92 million people. That is more than triple the population of Iraq or Afghanistan when we started our disastrous regime change wars in those two countries 2 decades ago. Iran has considerable regular military forces, but it also has a huge Revolutionary Guard force, which has effectively its own army, its own navy, its own intelligence service, its own special forces. It also plays a huge role in the massive, suffocating, brutal domestic security services that are happy to terrorize the Iranian people in the best of times and to massacre the Iranian people in the worst of times, which they have done in the last 8 weeks. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps has massive economic interests. They have a huge hold on multiple sectors of the Iranian economy. And to state the obvious, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps is not the kind of force that's going to go poof if a Donald Trump airstrike manages to kill Iran's supreme leader. If they do kill the supreme leader, which appears maybe to be what they tried to do earlier today, then what will happen? I mean, this isn't Venezuela. There's no vice Ayatollah who's going to step in and take over the top job, except she'll take calls from Marco Rubio. Right? What will happen then? If you voted for Donald Trump for president because you believed the hype that he was America first, that he was against foreign wars, that he was definitely against regime change wars in foreign country, well, again, good morning. I hope you slept well. But the president in this case says explicitly that this is a war we are waging for regime change. And the existing leader, Khamenei, who has been in place since 1989, there is no other person of that stature to just pop in place and say, okay, it's done. We've made that change. And so if you really did want the Iranian people themselves to rise up in some kind of popular uprising and totally change their form of government, if you wanted the beleaguered and oppressed Iranian people to organize very quickly into a new populist political force to rise up against, among other things, the security services there that have been massacring them by the thousands this month and last. If you wanted that to happen, you probably could have taken some steps to help that happening, to make sure they can organize and can communicate, right? Maybe you would have turned the internet back on. And when you, Donald Trump, in your baseball hat, proclaimed on that weird taped message today that the Iranian police and the security forces and the Revolutionary Guard must surrender, they must lay down their weapons, as Donald Trump said this morning at 2:30, if that was what you wanted to happen, because you wanted the domestic security situation to become less dangerous for the Iranian people to rise up and overthrow their government, if you actually wanted to make that happen, instead of just saying it, you as the U.S. government, maybe you as the U.S. government in coalition with other allies that you might have bothered to bring on board, you might have given the Iranian police and Revolutionary Guard and security services some instructions on how to surrender and lay down their weapons. Some path to do that, which Trump did not. As I say, you might have taken steps to turn the internet back on in Iran. So the people there, the Iranian people could reach each other and the world, and so the world could reach them too. If you actually wanted the Iranian people to have a chance rising up against the regime that has oppressed them for so many decades, you might not have gutted the crucial Farsi language Voice of America communications platform and put it in the hands of a soft-focus election denier local news anchor who is most famous for proclaiming the fraudulence of American elections. If this is a regime change war, as Trump says it is, because Trump is seriously hoping the Iranian people will complete the job for him, it is worth knowing that there has been no serious or even unserious effort by the United States to make it possible, let alone plausible, for any uprising by the Iranian people to succeed. And so why did Donald Trump just start this war? Why is this happening? Cui bono, right? Who benefits? It's always useful to start that question in any country. Who benefits? Who wants Iran bombed off the map and for their own reasons? Who are Iran's rivals and enemies? Perennially, it's the Gulf Arab states, countries like Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates and Qatar. You know, Qatar, the country that just gave Donald Trump a really, really nice $400 million plane, really a gilded flying palace for his own use, both during his presidency, and after. Trump plans to take that plane with him and keep using it after he leaves office, if he ever leaves office. And you remember United Arab Emirates, famous for recently structuring a totally pointless crypto financial transaction so that $2 billion of it would be stuffed into the Trump family's otherwise worthless brand new crypto financial firm. And of course, you remember the Saudis, who stuffed another $2 billion into the pockets of Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, just as Trump's first term in office came to a close. You might remember enough people were alarmed about that when it happened that the Trump folks actually sort of bothered to come up with an excuse for what made that okay. They said, don't worry, Jared will never again work for the U.S. government. He's never coming back to Washington. So it's okay that he's taken all this money from the Saudis now. We will never have to worry about having somebody involved in U.S. policy who has also just been given billions of dollars by Saudi Arabia, apparently for no reason. Well, that was the explanation when he took all that money from the Saudis at the end of Trump's first term. And now today, who has been leading the negotiations on behalf of the United States government with Iran before we just started this war with them today? I mean, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was in St. Kitts this week. It wasn't him. No, it was Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, recently paid billions of dollars by Iran's chief rival, and nevertheless sitting there alongside Trump's tiny real estate friend, Steve Witkoff, who has sought recently to improve his considerable family fortunes by going to Qatar to seek money from its sovereign wealth fund. Weird that those talks didn't work, right? It's like if you were having a backyard dispute with your neighbor, you know, hey, your new fence crosses the property line, comes over into my yard. That tree you just cut down, that hedge you just cut down, hey, that was mine. You're having a neighborly dispute with your neighbor on your block. And the cops break down your door with a battering ram. They arrest you and your whole family. They ransack your house, and then they light it afire and bulldoze it. And they tell your neighbor, hey, it's all done. You can take his whole backyard, and you can take his house now, too. And as you're trying to figure out why this has just happened, you come to learn that your neighbor has been paying massive bribes to the police in your town. Oh, that's what's going on. I mean, there's a lot of attention on Israel, and indeed Israel and the United States have worked together in the bombing campaign, not only the one that started today, but the campaign against Iran in June. But it is the Gulf Arab states who are arrayed against Iran, who want Iran removed as their regional rival. It is those countries that have been assiduously buying up members of the Trump family and the Trump administration with just astonishing amounts of cash in recent years, and particularly in recent months. And now for that low, low price, they appear to have rented the services of the United States military to start a war that they want, but that the American people do not. And that our American government hasn't bothered to explain in terms that are even internally consistent, let alone rational or sound. Why did Donald Trump today just start a war with Iran? You tell me. The New York Times editorial board writes today that in this second term, Trump's, quote, appetite for military intervention grows with the eating. And that seems just observably true. Iran doesn't have ballistic missiles that can reach us. Iran has not achieved some kind of breakthrough in nuclear enrichment that is a new sudden emergency. Iran isn't about to have a nuclear bomb. And I think it's fair to say this is not about Donald Trump's emotional desire to provide support to the Iranian people. If it were, we might actually be supporting the Iranian people. So why is it? Maybe it's for oil, as the president daydreams himself into another 19th century war fantasy of conquering some foreign land he doesn't understand or care about, but he would like to rob them of their natural resources. Maybe he thinks Iran and its proud 92 million people will happily and easily become a new colony in an empire helmed by an American emperor. Maybe that's what he thinks. But as this now becomes the 7th country Trump has bombed just since being back in office for 1 year, cui bono? Who benefits? It seems like a disturbingly easy question to answer. Why has the U.S. government been pushed in this direction? Follow the money. Why is Donald Trump willing to let that happen? Well, with this president, sadly, we keep learning over and over and over again that the easiest answer is almost always the truest one. He does not play four-dimensional chess. There's just him and what we know he's like, right? This president appears to have grown his enormous and excitable new appetite for military intervention in just this 1 year back in office. Apparently because he just thinks war is easy. It's exciting. It earns him not only close attention, but even occasionally plaudits from the very serious people who are professionally inclined to believe that there's some rationale, some strategery, some good thinking behind the start of every war, particularly in the Middle East. Starting a war, launching airstrikes, doing this sort of thing, it gets him a ton of attention. He gets to do it unilaterally, he contends. Naturally, there's no question that he would seek a declaration of war from Congress or even an authorization for the use of military force. He sees war as something he gets to do on his own say-so in a baseball hat from home that is exciting, that is controversial, that is all about him. And not for nothing, it's the world's greatest change of subject. Today, Saturday, is a weekday. It's a school day in Iran as we start to get reports of the damages inside not just Tehran, but elsewhere in Iran. The internet is off in Iran. The government in Iran hasn't advised its own people what to do as American airstrikes start bombarding multiple cities. Donald Trump, when he was a private citizen, repeatedly in 2011, 2012, and 2013, said that then President Barack Obama was about to start a war with Iran in order to help his political prospects. He kept saying over and over again that Barack Obama was about to start a war with Iran in order to get reelected, in order to help the Democratic Party's political prospects. Donald Trump was wrong about that. Barack Obama didn't start a war with Iran. But we know why Trump thought Obama should have done it. He said so. He said that was exactly what Obama would need to do in order to get reelected, in order to put wind in his political sails. We know what Donald Trump thought would be the salutary domestic political effect of a U.S. president starting a war with Iran. And now today, as he is facing domestic political disaster in this year's elections, now today our wildly unpopular U.S. president has started that war himself. Why do you think he did it?
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump's war with Iran is illegal, reckless, and wrong. We are only on day 3, and it is already an indelible moral stain on this country. Today, the war threatened to explode into a larger regional conflict, something that many have warned could happen. Air raid sirens were heard in Jordan, while Qatar's government said it shot down 2 bombers coming from Iran. That is in addition to renewed fighting between Israel and Hezbollah fighters in Lebanon. And just this evening, within the last hour, there's been news of a drone attack on the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. It caught on fire. At this point, there are no casualties. Today, 3 U.S. fighter jets were actually shot down over our ally Kuwait in what was apparently an act of Kuwaiti-friendly fire. All 6 crew members survived, thankfully. It's emblematic, however, of the reckless, slapdash way the Trump administration has handled this conflict. The Iranian Red Crescent Society, a humanitarian group, says the death toll in their country has topped 500. And that includes a death toll of at least 150 from a reported strike at a girls' elementary school. At least 10 people have died in Israel, according to officials there. Today, the official death toll for American service members increased to 6. Yesterday, Donald Trump said they would not be the last.
We pray for the full recovery of the wounded and send our immense love and eternal gratitude to the families of the fallen. And sadly, there will likely be more. Before it ends, that's the way it is.
Trump's tone in talking about the dead U.S. service members, the ones who've lost their lives and the ones who may lose their lives in the future as just part of what happens in war, is representative of the shocking glibness with which Trump has handled this entire war. In fact, he did not even speak publicly until today, the 3rd day of this conflict, and that's because Trump spent the weekend at his Florida golf house in West Palm Beach. He launched a massive military undertaking, an unprovoked war of choice, in the middle of the night from behind some hastily hung curtains in his vacation home. Looking absolutely exhausted, I might add, wearing a ridiculous USA baseball cap. Obviously, in the midst of an operational security nightmare, one might wonder, can any Mar-a-Lago guest just swing by and poke their head in to take a look at the big poster showing the location of all of our military personnel and the targets we're going for? Is it cool to wear an Apple Watch and bring your iPhone into the supposedly secure facility near all the dancing? So real questions. We know they're not taking this stuff seriously. On Friday night before the strikes, a podcaster from TMZ says he learned about the war before Congress did. He apparently overheard people from the administration chatting about it at the next table at Joe's Stone Crab. I'm not making this up. We're talking about war, literal matters of life and death. And Trump can't even hold it together for a single speech. He cannot even pretend to be interested in the devastation, death, and danger he's unleashed before he gets bored and starts talking about the drapes.
We have a lot of great service members here with us, too, in this beautiful building. Isn't it beautiful? We're adding on to the building a little bit. We're improving the building. See that nice drape? When that comes down, right now you see a very, very deep hole. But in about a year and a half from now, you're going to see a very, very beautiful building. And there's your entrance to it right there. In fact, it looks so nice, I think I'll save money on the doors, because it can't get more beautiful than that. I picked those drapes in my first term. I always like gold, but I think we can save a lot of money. I just saved curtains. But, and it'll be spectacular. It'll be the most beautiful ballroom. I believe it, because I built many a ballroom. I believe it's going to be the most beautiful ballroom anywhere in the world.
6 U.S. service members are dead in a war that he ordered. He went on like that for 2 minutes. And then found his way somehow back to the reason he was there, honoring 3 veterans, one posthumously with the Medal of Honor, one from Vietnam, one World War II, one who was killed in action in Afghanistan. Trump, of course, made what is now his sort of weird, very weird standard joke. He himself would really like to get a Medal of Honor, but has been told he can't get it. It should be noted he absolutely had the chance to get one, the same way those soldiers did. So far, 6 American service members are dead in this war. In the last 3 days, he has called everyone to brag about what he's done, including us here at MS Now. He's also called NBC News and ABC News and Fox News and Axios and the New York Times and the Atlantic and the New York Post, even the Daily Mail. I'm probably missing a couple. In that interview with the New York Post, Trump said he does not have the yips about putting boots on the ground in Iran. In other words, sending U.S. service members to fight and die in Iran. The yips, like you might get on the putting green. It's not how you talk about sending American men and women to fight and die in a foreign country whose government you have decided to topple seemingly on a whim without any real justification. I have just been so struck over the last few days. This is obviously a big game to him. And to all of them, for all the other war hawks and tough talkers in this cabinet. Guys like Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth.
We didn't start this war, but under President Trump, we are finishing it. If you threaten Americans anywhere on earth, we will hunt you down without apology and without hesitation, and we will kill you. This is not a so-called regime change war, but the regime sure did change. Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America and death from Israel. No stupid rules of engagement, no nation-building quagmire, no democracy-building exercise, no politically correct wars.
Crucially, Trump was also talked into this war by Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who, as the New York Times reports, met with Trump in the Oval Office last month. Quote, I'm quoting the Times reporting here in the lead, determined to keep the American president on the path to war. Netanyahu, by his own admission, has been pushing for a U.S. war with Iran for about as long as I have been alive.
אבל אנחנו מביאים למערכה הזאת גם את סיועה של ארצות הברית, את ידידי נשיא ארצות הברית דונלד טראמפ, את צבא ארצות הברית, ושילוב הכוחות הזה מאפשר לנו לעשות את מה שאני מייחל לעשות כבר 40 שנה, להכות את משטר הטרור שוק על ירך.
What I have yearned to do for 40 years, and it's true. I've watched him yearn. My entire adult life as a journalist has been covering Benjamin Netanyahu attempting to get the U.S. government to start a war with Iran or to join an Israeli one. And then today, in a moment I couldn't really believe that I was watching what was happening, the Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, came out and made it very clear, according to him, I don't even know if I believe this, but this is the story now from the Trump administration, very clear whose lead we are following.
We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act. Do
you hear that logic? That we didn't decide. The Israelis decided to strike. We were with them, giving them intelligence. We knew that the Iranians would strike against our forces, so then we preemptively struck the Iranians to stop that from happening. And so here we are. This has been long desired and sought by a relatively small sliver of people for 25 years that I've been covering American politics. But here it is, war with Iran. And it should not go unsaid that this war is illegal. Congress declares war, not the president. And it is a war because Donald Trump called it a war. They're trying to spin it now as combat operations, but Donald Trump called it a war. And Donald Trump just went ahead and did it anyway. But more than just being unconstitutional, very clearly illegal under international law as well, the war is also morally reprehensible. It's wrong. And that's not to say, quite obviously, the Iranian government hasn't done all sorts of truly awful things, both domestically and internationally. But that does not justify launching a war of aggression and choice, which is what this is. Because consequences are real. There's 550 Iranians at least that are dead, men, women, and children. We don't know how many were civilians vaporized because they were just in the wrong place when our or Israel's bombs fell. But every time you see those reports, you have to remember those are real people, actual people, exactly the same as you and me. The same rich, complex internal lives we do. The same hopes and fears and ambitions and petty rivalries, webs of love and friendship and family that are now torn to shreds. Torn to shreds because Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu willed it to be. And all this may sound obvious, but it has to be said. Because here, in the richest, most powerful nation on earth, war is something you watch on TV or you doom scroll through on social media, at least for those members of the U.S. Armed Services who aren't deployed. It is something that happens to those other people. But outside these borders, war is having a bomb dropped on your daughter's elementary school, seeing some alert or getting a panicked call, or on your apartment building or the hospital where you are receiving care. Death from above. And when you only view war through our perspective, the understanding the bombs are never coming for us, it becomes nothing more than an abstraction. It's far too easy to wave away the loss of human life. It's priced in. It's the cost of doing business. Remember, there was one instance in my lifetime when we in America experienced death from above. September 11, 2001, one of the darkest days I've ever been through, that we've all ever been through. The shared trauma from that one day caused a decades-long shift in American culture and foreign policy and American politics. It defined multiple generations. For us, that kind of violence is an anomaly. It is a once-in-a-lifetime tragedy. For other people in other countries, the terror is commonplace. Because, in part, of the kinds of war of aggression that Donald Trump just started.
Donald Trump started this war alone, wanted to basically go it alone. This was an operation that did not involve consulting Congress, other countries, Europe, NATO. It was essentially a U.S. operation with one other country involved, Israel, but not any of the traditional allies that Republican and Democratic administrations have relied on in the Middle East and in general throughout really the last, say, 60 years of post-World War II foreign policy. And so going it alone was a choice, just as starting the war was a choice. And we are seeing very quickly how that choice is working. I'm going to show you the evidence, not opinion, not saying that the news has some monopoly on how to do foreign policy, but just what we're learning about that choice. I can tell you off top, as we start the third week of the war, that 13 American service members have been killed here. Another 200 have been injured. Some of those stories are harder to tell because we get the information as it comes. Pentagon has released information about the casualties, but we don't have voluminous videos or coverage of that. But keep in mind that human toll, it's rising. On the other side of the war, over 2,000 Iranians have been estimated killed. Today, Iran strikes hit Dubai, the area of Dubai's airport, one of the busiest in the world. Iran also hitting the U.S. embassy in Baghdad over the weekend. U.S. officials reporting 15,000 Iranian targets have now been struck. Today, multiple U.S. allies said that if Trump started this alone and wants to go it alone, well, fine. But they are rebuffing what seem like late, unstrategic calls by Donald Trump after starting alone to want allies to only come in when he tries to call them in. Some critics say desperately so. You see the Times headline, allies rebuff Trump's appeal for help in the critical Strait of Hormuz, which relates to all of these surging gas prices. Those officials include Germany, Japan, Italy, and Australia saying they're not helping right now. Now, that doesn't mean that couldn't change over time, but it is how, as I mentioned to you, the go-it-alone approach is working. Donald Trump acted without allies for the first 2 weeks, give or take. Now he wants them in, and they're saying no. A reminder that even the awesome unilateral power of the United States does not solve all military and economic challenges. Again, that's just the reality out there. There's hundreds of millions of barrels of oil now that are estimated essentially stuck in the Persian Gulf. And the oil industry telling the White House this fuel crunch, which has only just begun, will, if things don't change, it will, quote, likely worsen. Experts also say that Donald Trump's other ideas to deal with this involve more military engagement, for example, the kind of quasi-Pentagon capitalist team of escorting oil tankers, and it's not clear how much Americans would really tolerate that effort, expenditure, or the risk of American lives just as a stopgap to get some commercial Exxon oil tankers moving around. Then there's the question of sending in ground troops. That's stoking warnings that Trump could be facing something we've seen from all the way back to early Vietnam, to the Iraq surge, and a heck of a lot of other stories that if you're watching this, if you're hearing my voice in America or watching on YouTube abroad, just about everybody knows this history. Maybe Donald Trump didn't, but it's called the escalation trap, and it's what happens when you have open-ended commitments and you are the bomber or the occupier, whether by air or land, and the other side of the war are people fighting for their country and lives. Trump was warned about the scenario in advance. The Joint Chiefs told him, according to reports, in multiple Oval Office briefings, that's kind of one of the most important kind, that Iran would deploy mines, drones, and missiles to close the world's most vital shipping lane. So if you're busy living your life and you're not thinking about the Strait of Hormuz all that often, that's fine. But the Pentagon and our 17 intelligence agencies have laid this out for a long time. And the Journal has the reporting, which might make aspects of Trump's leadership look bad, but they have the reporting that he was told this in advance. That's relevant to how the Trump administration is also trying to censor coverage in the Wall Street Journal. We'll get to that. Trump was, quote, frustrated with all this. Now you see, of course, tankers on fire. Now, in the reporting, Trump then asked, well, why can't the U.S. immediately reopen the Strait of Hormuz? So that's later, according to the Times, different reporting, again, multiple outlets corroborating this, the very thing he was told would happen and would be hard to just fix, even with our mighty military, he then has to ask about after the fact. This is increasing the scrutiny on the leadership, the competence, the war planning of a self-declared wartime president who might have thought that what he did to a small country in the South American landscape could just be repeated anywhere else, and that the warnings he's hearing, he either didn't absorb, didn't believe, or didn't understand, which is kind of worse, what it really meant, where we were headed, and who would pay the price. Today, the president suggests the Mideast attack was some kind of, quote, habit.
So we don't need it, but we did it. It's almost, you could say we did it out of habit, which is not a good thing to do.
You could call that the kind of candor or blurting that you sometimes hear. The president, of course, has jumped around on rationales and defenses. Now he's sort of voicing, for whatever reason, a kind of a critique or a negative view of why we did this, because we just do this every so often. This is a serious matter, but sometimes, as we know, culture and comics kind of wrap it all up together. Saturday Night Live was giving Donald Trump quite the hard time over the weekend, mocking many aspects of this, including something that just about everyone knows about, in contrast to every other major Mideast war we have faced over the last 30 years. This is the only one where there has not been an actual reason, an actual goal shared. Everybody remembers post 9/11 Afghanistan, which turned out to be a complex endeavor, but the rationale was toppling a regime that had helped terrorists. So they said the Taliban had to go. That's what we call regime change. The Iraq war was sold on WMD. Whether it was true or not, there was a reason you have to stop the WMD. This war, as of this third week, doesn't have a consistent rationale from the president or the White House, something that is risible. Take a look.
If you're wondering why I was in the back seat of this random family's car, I'll tell you the same thing I say when people ask about our plans for Iran. I don't know.
Pentagon doesn't know. The impression of the Pentagon chief there says the same thing. He doesn't know the president. If he knows, he's not telling, and not telling it as one consistent rationale.
When Trump's Energy Secretary Chris Wright tweeted out that the U.S. Navy was escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz, when in fact we weren't, did he think they were? Did somebody tell him that we were? Did he have a good reason to believe it? When he did that, that wasn't even the start of how well the Trump administration is handling this teensy little problem Trump reportedly thought would be no big deal when he decided to launch an unprovoked war on Iran. Trump reportedly told his advisors that he did not believe Iran would close the Strait of Hormuz if he attacked Iran. Of course, Iran did. Then Trump's defense secretary said the Strait of Hormuz was open for transit, except for the small matter of the Iranians attacking ships that tried to pass through it. Other than that, Mrs. Lincoln. Then Trump told Fox News that ship captains should, quote, show some guts and just sail through the strait because they had nothing to fear because Iran was defeated and wouldn't attack any more ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And then Iran attacked more ships in the Strait of Hormuz. And then Trump said that the U.S. Navy would be happy soon, very soon, to start escorting ships through the Strait of Hormuz. And then the Navy was like, no, my lord, no, we cannot do that. The memorable phrase there was that it would be a, quote, kill box for the United States Navy if they even tried to do that. Then, in advance of a presidential press conference today, Trump administration sources apparently told reporters that very soon, the U.S. government would be announcing a coalition of allies who would be working together to escort ships through the Strait of Hormuz. We were about to announce who our allies were going to be in this joint collective effort. And everybody printed it like that meant it was going to happen. When will you learn? Watch what they do, not what they say. Because then the president held that presidential press conference and he announced, quote, we don't need anybody to help us in the Strait of Hormuz. We don't need anybody. We can do it ourselves. Then he said that he'd be announcing very soon who, nevertheless, was going to be helping us in the Strait of Hormuz. Then he berated and insulted our allies for not doing anything to help us in the Strait of Hormuz. And then reporters all over the world started checking with their own governments. And indeed, whatever he thought he was announcing about other countries coming to help us in the Strait of Hormuz, nobody is coming to help. And in fact, he can't do it alone. And so, what do we got? I mean, maybe we'll get a ballroom? Russia's doing really well out of all this as the skyrocketing price of oil fills up the Kremlin's coffers and makes them solvent again after all these years of dictatorship and corruption and going on 5 years of their disastrous war in Ukraine. Russia now is not just getting rich off of Trump's war in Iran. Russia is outright helping Iran kill U.S. troops and target U.S. facilities in the Middle East. Trump's U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, says Russia has a wartime, quote, strategic partnership with Iran. Iranian officials have publicly confirmed that they have Russia's, quote, military cooperation. We reported last week here on this show that Trump had responded to that by really making Russia pay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, by relaxing U.S. sanctions on Russia. Since then, he's done so again. He has further relieved Russia of the burden of U.S. sanctions while Russia is helping kill American troops. But it doesn't stop there. David Korn at Mother Jones Magazine reports that Trump's DOJ has also, very quietly, just chosen this auspicious time while we're at war with Iran. They've just chosen now to ask the courts to withdraw a guilty plea and reverse a prison sentence that was given to a guy who the FBI said is linked to Russian intelligence. The guy has been in jail because he pled guilty to lying to the FBI, specifically to bringing the FBI fake stories about President Biden supposedly taking bribes. The FBI concluded not only that those stories were false, but that this guy deliberately lied in bringing that stuff to the FBI and that he was linked to Russian intelligence at the time he was doing this. Now, Trump's Justice Department is trying to get the guy sprung and get his guilty plea reversed. The court filing in this guy's case has been signed by Todd Blanche, Trump's handpicked #2 official at the Justice Department. trying to help Russia and reportedly Russian intelligence, while Russia is using Russian intelligence to help Iran kill American troops and target American facilities in the Middle East. And, you know, maybe our president just can't stop himself from acting to help Russia, even when Russia is acting to kill Americans. Maybe he just can't stop himself. It just feels so good, he can't stop. But doesn't it seem like in the middle of this war, he should be able to stop himself from at least helping Iran? From helping the Iranian regime, which he has just declared war on? Because also, quietly, amid this inexplicable war on Iran, Trump's Justice Department has also just moved to drop the largest Iranian sanctions case ever in history. This is a case involving a bank called Hawk Bank. They're being prosecuted for, again, the largest ever known violation of sanctions on the Iranian regime, for illegally sending tens of billions of dollars to Iran. That's what that prosecution is about. And in the middle of Trump waging war on Iran, bombing Iran, supposedly because he's so opposed to the Iranian regime, Trump now simultaneously has had his Justice Department drop that case, the largest Iranian sanctions case ever, because now suddenly he wants to let all that slide. It's almost like he's not really doing things for the reason he says he's doing them, right? So the Saudis paid $2 billion to Trump's son-in-law, Jared. And now Jared is the U.S. government's point person in the Middle East. The New York Times now reports that while Jared is serving as the U.S. government's point person in the Middle East, Jared is simultaneously asking the Saudis for yet more billions of dollars for his private business. More than $2 billion they've already given him. Now he wants more. You know what? Why would they say no? For the low, low price of what they've already given him, the Saudis have apparently discovered the price of renting out something called the Armed Forces of the United States of America to attack their rival nation, Iran, for a war that makes a lot of sense for the leaders of Saudi Arabia and Israel, but makes no sense at all for the United States. The New York Times reports this weekend that the Saudi Crown Prince, MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, has been on the phone frequently with President Trump since the war started, telling him to keep bombing, keep, quote, hitting the Iranians hard. Keep it up. More of this war, right? We paid for it. We're going to get what we paid for. I got to say, I don't know why this isn't more of a show-stopping scandal in our country, right? Is it that hard to see what this is? I mean, here's this guy actively asking X country for money. They've already given him billions of dollars. He's asking for billions more dollars for his personal business, his private business. He's asking X country for money. At the same time he's asking them for money, he is also making U.S. government policy toward that country. That's it, right? Those are all the dots you have to connect. I mean, this is not like string theory, right? The result, I mean, if this guy's asking this country for money for himself while also making U.S. government policy toward that country, the resultant policy is likely to be whatever that country wants it to be. Because if it isn't, then Jared's going to be less likely to get the money that he is asking them for, right? The interests of the United States are being exchanged for private income for the president's son-in-law. Is this hard to see? Is this hard to grasp? Right? While we're all wondering why it is really that we're fighting this war they can't explain. I mean, for his part, the president's son-in-law says he's following the law and following ethics rules, but how would we know? They also aren't even making him file financial disclosures. And Russia helps kill American service members and gets paid for it by the Trump administration. And don't worry, BP will get new oil for us from the molten center of the earth. Because look, they built something with duct tape they say will work to drill it all up. And the tropical walruses will junk shot the thing for us if anything goes wrong, so we'll all be fine. Meanwhile, this is the most unpopular war in modern American history. The president is trying to manage that by today threatening to kill reporters who don't report on the war the way he wants them to. That'll fix it. That'll fix it. Maybe he'll take a page from Putin and tell us we're no longer allowed to call it a war. We all have to start calling it an excursion like he does, or we'll all go to jail, or he'll kill us all. Sure, that'll do it. The war is unlikely to get more popular in days ahead, as Trump's repeated declarations of victory have not proven to be enough to protect U.S. forces and facilities that have come under fire from Iran and their proxies, a U.S. facility in Bahrain, the U.S. facility in Kuwait, the U.S. embassy in Iraq, the U.S. facilities in Saudi Arabia. We weren't even capable of keeping our ally Kuwait from accidentally shooting down not one, not two, but three of our F-15 fighter jets on the first full day of the war. How was Kuwait able to shoot down 3 F-15s? Now we're sending in a Marine Expeditionary Force, as the president refuses to rule out boots on the ground, refuses to rule out ground troops.
He actually said he's not afraid of anything. Those are his exact words, not afraid of anything. The man who has spent years afraid of the Epstein files and is still blocking the full release of the complete Epstein files, the man who wears silly hats because he's afraid his hair might be blown out of place, the man who's afraid of letting anyone see his natural skin color or his college transcript or his SAT scores, the man who's afraid of falling down the steps of Air Force One, and the man who was very, very afraid of being drafted into the United States Army during the Vietnam War. That man today said he's not afraid of anything. And it could not be more perfect that the question that provoked Donald Trump to tell the lie that he's not afraid of anything included a reference to Vietnam.
The Iranian regime has told Sky News, if you put boots on the ground in Iran, it will be another Vietnam. Are you afraid of that?
No, I'm really not afraid of anything.
Iran's deputy foreign minister was asked by Sky News today what would happen if U.S. troops invaded Iran, and he said, quote, just read what happened in Vietnam. Donald Trump was so afraid of being drafted and sent to Vietnam in 1968 that he got a note from a doctor saying that his feet just couldn't take it. Those same feet that have covered miles and miles and miles of golf courses and continue to, just couldn't take it. And in those days, rich kids like Donald Trump had an easy time escaping the draft with notes from doctors. But as the American quagmire in Vietnam deepened, as the death toll increased, the war dragged on into the 1970s, the rules of the draft became stricter and the Army became harder to avoid. But Donald Trump was already safe. He'd already skipped the draft. His boots were never going to hit the ground in Vietnam. Donald Trump wasn't the only guy his age who was terrified of going to Vietnam. Most young American men subject to the draft were afraid of going to Vietnam and did everything they could to avoid it. But now Donald Trump, the most cowardly human being ever to have the title of President of the United States, says, I'm really not afraid of anything. He's lying, of course, as he is in response to almost every question he is asked. Donald Trump lied today in response to an intelligence official he appointed resigning in protest of Donald Trump's war. In true Trump administration style, Joseph Kent, Donald Trump's director of the National Counterterrorism Center, announced his resignation on social media, saying in his social media post and his resignation letter to Donald Trump, I cannot, in good conscience, support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. To which Donald Trump said this.
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security.
Always? Always. Really? I always thought he was weak on security. Here's what Donald Trump said on social media when he appointed Joe Kent to be the director of the National Counterterrorism Center. a soldier, Green Beret, and CIA officer. Joe has hunted down terrorists and criminals since his entire adult life. Joe will help us keep America safe by eradicating all terrorism. And now that same Donald Trump says, I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. And no one proves Donald Trump to be a liar more effectively than Donald Trump. And so tonight, I suggest you take your pick about when Donald Trump was lying about Joe Kent, when he appointed him, or today when Joe Kent quit. Of course, when we're dealing with a pathological liar like Donald Trump, he could be lying both times. But Donald Trump has definitely caught himself in at least one lie about Joe Kent. Donald Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, refused to rush to the defense of Donald Trump and his war. And that's exactly what she was supposed to do in this situation. But she also refused to condemn Joe Kent, which was the other thing she was supposed to do. Joe Kent, who was a member of the intelligence community that Tulsi Gabbard theoretically commands. Now, I'm going to read Tulsi Gabbard's statement in full. And I ask you to listen for what I could not find in her statement: a defense of Donald Trump's choice to go to war, or a clear statement that Joe Kent is wrong. Donald Trump's director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, did not say either one of those things. Instead, she said this: Donald Trump was overwhelmingly elected by the American people to be our president and commander-in-chief. As our commander-in-chief, he is responsible for determining what is and is not an imminent threat, and whether or not to take action he deems necessary to protect the safety and security of our troops, the American people, and our country. The Office of the Director of National Intelligence is responsible for helping coordinate and integrate all intelligence to provide the President and Commander-in-Chief with the best information available to inform his decisions. After carefully reviewing all the information before him, President Trump concluded that the terrorist Islamist regime in Iran posed an imminent threat, and he took action based on that conclusion. Now notice, Tulsi Gabbard did not say an imminent threat to the United States, just an imminent threat, but she also didn't agree with it. Tulsi Gabbard refused to say the simple words at the end of that statement: I agree with Donald Trump's conclusion. That's what she was supposed to say. And what she did instead was give us a public display of insubordination, as much as you could possibly expect from a director of national intelligence. Just a direct defiance of Donald Trump in that statement. If Tulsi Gabbard was going to say there was an imminent threat to the United States from Iran, that was the place to say it, right there, and she refused to say it. She refused to say it today. And in a situation like this, Tulsi Gabbard's silence on the imminent threat question, what she thinks of it, is obviously deliberate, and it leaves open the question of whether she agrees with Joe Kent that, quote, Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation. It is inconceivable that Tulsi Gabbard agrees with Donald Trump and refuses to say publicly that she agrees with Donald Trump. It is possible that Donald Trump is incapable of reading the implications of Tulsi Gabbard's statement, and no one in the White House would dare probably bring it to his attention. It is also possible that Donald Trump is just incapable of just reading a statement by anyone about anything. Any other president would read such a statement as a public disagreement with their director of national intelligence, and that person's resignation would be demanded instantly. But Donald Trump may be too distracted and too busy juggling his lies and might not be able to keep up with everyone who is disagreeing with him, or implicitly, in Tulsi Gabbard's case, calling him a liar. No president in history has ever claimed to drop bombs just for fun. That would, of course, brand that president as a sociopath. And so, of course, Donald Trump said exactly that. On Saturday, in a telephone interview with NBC News, Donald Trump said that he might continue to bomb an oil facility on Karg Island in Iran, quote, just for fun. That phrase will live in infamy with Donald Trump's name for hundreds of years, as historians are able to isolate those words, just for fun, as the conclusive proof they will need to make the case that Donald Trump is a sociopath, that Donald Trump was a mad bomber in every sense. Every historian will be able to see that he was a madman who thought bombing was fun. The Wall Street Journal is reporting tonight a confirmation of some previous reporting that Russia is helping Iran target U.S. military forces. That means Russia may be responsible for the Iranian attack that killed the first 6 American military personnel killed in Donald Trump's war. The Wall Street Journal reports, quote, Russia has been expanding its intelligence sharing and military cooperation with Iran, providing satellite imagery and improved drone technology to aid Tehran's targeting of U.S. forces in the region. People familiar with the matter said Russia is trying to keep its closest Middle Eastern partner in the fight against the United States and Israel military might and prolong a war that is benefiting Russia militarily and economically. Russia has been providing Iran with the locations of U.S. military forces in the Middle East. That cooperation has deepened in early days of the war, with Russia recently providing satellite imagery directly to Iran. And what has Donald Trump done about that? What has Donald Trump done about Vladimir Putin helping Iran target U.S. military personnel and perhaps having helped Iran kill U.S. military personnel? What is Donald Trump doing about that? Donald Trump has, of course, done absolutely nothing, because it's Vladimir Putin we're talking about here.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The whiplash of the U.S.-Israeli war on Iran continues as it approaches its 4th week. We began the day with signs of imminent boots on the ground in Iran and ended with a Trump post on social media saying he will consider winding down the war. Go figure, I guess. Today, MS Now learned that this administration is sending an additional 2,500 Marines and 3 warships to the Middle East. That's in addition to the 2,500 troops Trump ordered to the region last week. Now, it takes a few weeks for them to get there, but we are now up to 5,000 American service members en route to the theater of combat that we know of. And I have to say, it is a little hard to imagine they're just going to go there and sit on the boats. I mean, take a step back. Remember where we were a month ago, right? They were moving all of these naval assets into the region from all over the world. It was a sort of unprecedented armada that had built up. And there was, at the time, an argument that this was all basically a Trumpian bluff, that it was being deployed as leverage for the ongoing nuclear negotiations, which were taking place with Iran, with the president's son-in-law and a real estate guy he's friends with. And as it turns out, I think clearly it wasn't just a negotiating tactic. They were preparing to start a war of choice, which they did. Now, to be absolutely clear, we have no idea what's happening now and if they are sending in ground troops to actually engage in combat. But I guess that's the point. Everything from the beginning of the war has been chaotic. There appears to be no strategy. And the commander-in-chief is constantly contradicting himself when he can bring himself to actually pay attention to the war he started, which isn't always. Maybe that's what he was doing when he took to social media just hours ago to his version of mission almost accomplished. He said, we're very close to meeting our military objectives, which, of course, he made up after the fact and are constantly shifting. He said he wants to wind down the war. What's that mean? We don't know. It's very hard to square that with all the other signs that the conflict isn't just dragging on, but it is intensifying and escalating. Instead of some quick decapitation of the regime, like we arguably saw in Venezuela, where we kidnapped and abducted the leader of that country, was replaced with his vice president, who we now, I guess, have good terms with, Trump likes because they're giving us oil. Unlike that, in Iran, as Bloomberg News puts it, we are approaching a quagmire. The White House now wants $200 billion in additional money to fund the war. That does not seem like something they would be asking for if they were looking to wind down anytime soon. And just today, the president says he has no interest in a ceasefire.
Well, look, we can have dialogue, but I don't want to do a ceasefire. You know, you don't do a ceasefire when you're literally obliterating the other side. They don't have a Navy. They don't have an Air Force. They don't have any equipment they don't have any spotters. They don't have anti-aircraft. They don't have radar. And their leaders have all been killed at every level. We're not looking to do that.
All right, so we're not looking to do that. We're also close to achieving our military objectives. In fact, we already won, he keeps saying, and we also may send in ground troops. Which is it? Again, no one knows. What we do know is that the Strait of Hormuz is still closed to non-Iranian ships. 5 military and shipping experts telling MS Now that reopening the strait would almost certainly require U.S. ground troops. And again, just looking at all this from afar, it really looks like that's the plan, right? They're going to send 5,000 troops in order for them to engage in combat to reopen the strait, which would mean literally risking American lives to keep the price of oil low. But Trump also says the strait is basically not our problem.
We don't use the strait. The United States. We don't need it. Europe needs it. Korea, Japan, China, a lot of other people. So they'll have to get involved a little bit on that one.
Now, he's wrong, of course. In fact, he's so wrong that I don't know if he's, an idiot or pretending to be. But if you know anything about global energy markets, right? 20% of the world's energy supply goes through the strait. Oil is a global commodity, globally priced. Just because that oil doesn't ship to the U.S., and he's right about that, doesn't mean U.S. consumers are going to be fully insulated from the resulting price shock. As you no doubt know. I mean, have you filled up your car in the last week? And so this control over 20% of the world's oil shipping is obviously a major leverage point for Iran. It's the big one. It's the reason that everyone talks about the Strait of Hormuz when they talk about Iran. So one solution the administration appears to be floating is to seize Iran's Karj Island, which is key for their oil exports. But even then, Trump will not publicly commit to a plan either way.
How will they operate? Well, you know, I may have a plan or I may not, but how would I ever say that to a reporter? If I said that to a reporter, Marco would say, please, sir, let's bring you over to the helicopter immediately, right? No, I can't tell you that.
So, right, the conceit here is that the chaos and the contradiction and the constant oscillations is all some engineered deception, right? I may have a plan, I may not, I can't tell you. But again, here's what we know, that seizing that island, which is something that military planners inside the Pentagon have wargamed for literally decades, it is crucial to Iran. Everyone understands that during a war, Iran would use Hormuz and the Strait as leverage. So this is something people thought about. And seizing the island would likely require boots on the ground, right? Combat troops invading Iran and fighting there. Even in that case, though, there's also no indication it would force Iran's hand to reopen the strait. This is key. There's a very good chance it would likely embolden Iran to escalate its attacks that it's already undertaking on energy infrastructure in the surrounding Gulf states, which, to put it mildly, would be probably pretty catastrophic. I mean, we are headed towards, if it continues in this way, and a genuinely unprecedented energy crisis, at least as bad as those of the late 1970s. But even as things stand, we are on the precipice of a potentially devastating situation. I mean, gas prices are up significantly. They are still rising. Officials in Saudi Arabia are now warning that a barrel of oil could top $180, that would be a record-breaking price, if the conflict does not wind down before April. Analysts who spoke to the Wall Street Journal said $200 barrels were not out of the question. In fact, United Airlines just put out a memo a few minutes ago saying they're preparing for 170, that they're not going to drop below that until the end of next year. This is the leverage Iran has. It's the leverage that anyone who's thought about this particular conflict for more than 10 minutes knows they have. And they intend to keep using it. In fact, this is really an amazing turn of events. The White House just lifted sanctions on some Iranian oil, the people that were bombing. That feels like a pretty good indication that Donald Trump is starting to get desperate. The war started out unpopular. High gas prices are going to make it so much worse. Today, the president got on the phone with our own Stephanie Ruhle at MS Now and just flat out lied about the origins of this war. Quote, I hit Iran with a B-2 bomber because 2 weeks later they had the nuclear weapon. They would have used it within a day or two or a week. Now, that's simply untrue. It's not just untrue at a sort of a normal level. It's preposterous and insane. Okay? Iran was nowhere near achieving a nuclear weapon. This has been widely reported, including, crucially, from multiple members of the Trump administration, including under oath testimony from his own intelligence officials before Congress this week. You'll remember that Trump and his administration crowed about how they had completely obliterated the nuclear program just last summer. We were all there. We all lived through it. We all heard it. But I think the reason he's lying, they're about to get a nuke and just drop it in a few days, is that he knows his war of aggression is unpopular and getting less popular by the day. So he is throwing anything at the wall to see what sticks. Today, he said we're winding down the war. Today, he also said we've already won the war. He said our allies will help us open the Strait of Hormuz. He said we will help our allies open the Strait of Hormuz. He said we don't need to open the Strait of Hormuz. He said we never needed help from our allies. He said our allies are cowards. He said NATO is a paper tiger. Meanwhile, again, the very real war that is actually happening far away, the human costs keep piling up. 13 Americans have lost their lives, 17 Israelis, 1,400 Iranians, millions more displaced. Over 1,000 have been killed just in Lebanon due to the Israeli incursion there. More than 150 others killed in the surrounding Gulf states. And, as is clear, the commander-in-chief, and again, we saw this in 2020. Remember, we've all blocked it out of our memory. It was a rough year. No one wants to think about it, but we all did live through 2020, and we saw how he handled COVID. There's no plan here. Remember? Open the schools, close the schools. Everyone has to socially distance. It'll be open by Easter. So, are we putting boots on the ground in Iran? Are we seizing Karj Island? Are we reopening the Strait of Hormuz? Are we winding down the war? Who knows? I don't think Donald Trump even knows.
But I'm actually going to start the show really with Trump's war of choice in Iran, of course, because we are now on day 27 of the conflict. And gas prices as of today have increased by a full $1 per gallon in just the last month. I'm sure you all have noticed that. Wall Street just had its worst day since the war began. Iran has categorically rejected Trump's offer to end the war. And even Republicans are irate with the administration over the lack of answers on Iran in the briefings they've done on the Hill just this week. And amid this ongoing crisis, the President of the United States held a cabinet meeting today where normally you would talk about, say, the war you launched 4 weeks ago and the impacts of it and what every cabinet member and agency should be doing about it to bring it to an end, what the strategy is. Well, that wasn't what he was focused on. He was laser focused on, of course, another very important issue facing the American people, the quality of our pens.
See this pen right here? This pen is an interesting example. It's the same thing. So this pen is very inexpensive, but it writes well. I like it. And you know, you hand pens out, you're signing and you hand them out. Beautiful pen, ballpoint. But I'm handing out to kids that don't even know what they're doing. What is this, Mommy? It's kids. They're getting a pen for $1,000. They have no idea what it is. And it had another problem. They didn't write well. So I take it out and I sign and there's no ink. This one, I called the guy. I said, I'd like to use your pen, but I can't have a gray thing with a big S on it. I can't do that with the press. Use your pen, but I like the pen the best, but I can't use your pen. He said, well, I can make it nicer. I said, that's nice. And I can even paint the White House on it, sir, if you like, in gold. Almost real gold. And by the way, this was not staged. I just saw the pen sitting there and I thought of this as an example.
Okay, I just want to note that we literally had to edit that together because he spoke about the pens for so long. It was more than 4 minutes. That would have taken up way too much time. But I do love the fact that he discloses there at the end that none of that was staged, as if any of us thought the extended riff on pens was part of his strategically written, prepared remarks. I certainly don't think it was. And I promise you, he went on, as I said, about the pens a whole lot longer than that. And when Trump finally did move on, he showed a lot less urgency and a lot less passion about the war he started than he did about America's calligraphy crisis, I guess you could call it. In fact, he said that contrary to all the reporting we're seeing, Iran is actually begging him to make a deal.
And they'll tell you, we're not negotiating. We will not negotiate. Of course they're negotiating. They've been obliterated. Who wouldn't negotiate? They are begging to make a deal. I mean, I read a story today that I'm desperate to make a deal. I
If I was desperate, he'd be the first to know. Pete, let's get the hell out of there. I'm the opposite of desperate. I don't care.
He's the opposite of desperate, everyone. You heard it there. He doesn't even care if the U.S. makes a deal with Iran somehow. And remember, Trump set a deadline for Iran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz by tomorrow, threatening to attack their civilian infrastructure if they don't. Well, late today, Trump announced that he was extending that deadline by 10 days, which doesn't feel like something he should have to do if Iran really is so desperate to make a deal. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Trump wants the public to think that he's got this all in the bag, that we've already won. He says that all the time, that he's just tying up some loose ends, finalizing a few words in the final document. But as much as that might sound like public posturing, Trump might actually believe that he can simply end this war whenever he wants. I mean, today the Wall Street Journal reports that behind the scenes, he's telling aides that he wants the war wrapped up according to his original timeline, which means within the next 2 weeks. Apparently, he's just over it. Multiple people familiar with the matter tell the Journal that, quote, in discussions with outside political allies, his attention has at times shifted to other topics, including the coming midterm elections. Who wants to talk about a war you started when you can talk about house races, I suppose? I mean, not only that, but Trump told an associate that the war was distracting from his other priorities, one source told the Journal. In other words, Trump seems increasingly bored by the war. He wants to focus on other things, like the midterms, of course, or, pens. But as everyone but him seems to understand, it's really just not that simple. You see, Trump has gotten used to the idea that he can make big, disastrous decisions and just reverse himself when he thinks things get out of control, when he sees people don't like it necessarily. I mean, we all watched him do it over and over again with his tariffs, threatening steep duties on imports, watching the markets crash, and then walking it all back. His habit of reversing his own decisions, as you all know, even has its own acronym, TACO, as in Trump always chickens out. But the thing is, Trump can't just TACO his way out of this war. There are other stakeholders who get a say when the war will end. And whether he likes it or not, Iran is one of them. So is Israel. And their leverage has only increased since he started bombing Iran almost 4 weeks ago. Trump can't just declare mission accomplished and walk away. It's not how it works. And the people around Trump, the ones who are actually carrying out this war, they know that, which is why every report we get on the administration's thinking indicates that they are preparing for a longer, much more protracted conflict. I mean, just before we got on the air, the Wall Street Journal reported that the Pentagon is weighing sending an additional 10,000 troops to the Middle East. That's according to multiple people familiar with the planning. And today, Axios cites 2 U.S. officials who say that the administration is preparing a massive escalation of this war. They're calling it a final blow, but it seems anything but final. It could include the use of ground forces. The plans reportedly include the use of ground forces as well as several options for invading Iranian-controlled territory. There are even preparations for ground operations deep inside the heart of Iran aimed at securing their enriched uranium, which is incredibly difficult to do. All of that suggests a much longer and much deeper conflict that could be incredibly costly, not just in terms of the funding needed, but more importantly in terms of the lives of the American military. I mean, at the same time, Bloomberg cites multiple sources who say that the administration is also preparing for the possibility of oil reaching as much as $200 a barrel, a huge spike that would have major implications for the U.S. economy. And also today, the Washington Post cites 3 sources who say the Pentagon is now considering diverting weapons intended for Ukraine and sending them to the Middle East instead as the conflict there continues to deplete U.S. munitions. Now, on top of all of that, there are signs that the Iranian regime has actually been emboldened by Trump's actions. Reuters reports that Iranian hardliners are now ramping up their calls for their country to build a nuclear bomb. And the Associated Press reports that Iran is now operating the Strait of Hormuz as a de facto toll booth, strengthening their grip on the critical passageway and levying fees on any ships they want to pass through safely. But none of that seems to bother Donald Trump. In fact, Trump now seems perfectly fine with Iran's grip on the Strait of Hormuz. Which brings me to the so-called mystery present from Iran that Trump has been teasing since Tuesday. Because today, he finally revealed what it was.
You know, I told you about a present, right? Steve, can I reveal the present? You can do anything you want to say. They said to show you the fact that we're real and solid and we're there. We're going to let you have 8 boats of oil, 8 boats, 8 big boats of oil. And actually, they then apologized for something they said, and they said, we're going to send 2 more boats. And it ended up being 10 boats.
That's right, everyone. The extravagant, expensive mystery present he was so excited about that Trump got from Iran turned out to be that Iran let 8 ships or go through the Strait of Hormuz without blowing them up, or that's reportedly what they committed to. Now, for context here, prior to Trump's war, roughly 110 ships sailed through that strait every day without incident. So I'm not sure that either getting through is something to celebrate that much. I mean, 10 ships, that's a very small percentage of 110 ships per day. Again, 110 per day, 10 just one time. You don't have to be a mathematician. Now, to be clear, Iran shouldn't be interfering with any maritime traffic, but apparently Trump thinks it's okay if they just let a few ships through here and there as they please. And there were moments today when it actually sounded like he had given up on reopening the Strait of Hormuz altogether.
The amazing thing is we don't need the Hormuz Strait. We don't need it. We don't need it at all. We have so much oil. Our country is not affected by this.
First off, anyone who has filled up their gas tank recently, which is most Americans, can tell you that our country absolutely is affected by this. But more importantly, the president now seems more and more resigned to accept the fallout from this war, even though the American people are growing more and more frustrated. A new Fox News poll out this week finds a full 59% of Americans disapprove of the job Trump is doing as president, his worst performance ever in that poll. And voters in that same poll disapprove of Trump's handling of the war by 28 points. It's not hard to see why Trump would want to move on from all of this.